everyone, it's Shannon here for Pink Fresh Studio. In today's video, we are going to play with the split panel technique. This is a really fun 2-for-1 technique, and we're going to combine it with some no-line watercoloring as well. I'm going to start by stamping my panels. I'm going to be using the new Sweet Blooms Cling stamp, and I'm going to start by stamping it onto an A2 panel of Bristol paper. Bristol is a really smooth paper, and it's going to allow my ink to really glide over the surface when I do my low water watercoloring. I'm going to ink this up in a light color. I'm using Misty Coast Pink Fresh Studio ink, which is a really light gray. Now that I've stamped this panel of Bristol paper, I'm going to move straight onto watercoloring, but I'm going to leave that stamp in my Misty because I'm going to use that Sweet Bloom stamp to stamp a second panel later. So now I'm going to do some very simple watercoloring. I'm going to use Tombow dual brush pens. I'm starting with the marker direct to paper. Started with a light green, now moving on to a slightly darker green, coloring more towards the base of the leaf. And then with my brush, I'm going to grab a small amount of water. I sprayed the water directly down onto my work surface, and I just picked up a small amount of water. And now with that damp brush, I can kind of blend out that ink. That ink starts to glide over the surface, and I'm able to create a really soft gradation with these two inks. And whenever my brush gets too much color on it and I'm not able to kind of achieve that gradation, it starts to look a little flat, I'll always stop, clean my brush a little bit, dry it, and then grab a little bit of clean water and then go back to my leaf and kind of work over the surface. So I've started on a second leaf, same process, did the lighter green kind of in the middle of the leaf, the darker green at the base, and then with my damp brush I start blending those colors together and creating a little gradation on that leaf, and that will give that leaf that convexed kind of look. And if I don't have enough of one color, I can scribble that color down onto the work surface, which I did with my darker green, and then just pick up that ink and kind of add it to my leaf, just to also help that gradation if it's starting to look a little flat. So I'm just about finishing up with that third leaf, and now I'm going to move on to my darker green and just draw the stems in. So the stems are stamped, but I'm just going to kind of make them green simply by taking my marker and drawing right over them. So I'm basically going to repeat this process for all the leaves on this panel. This does take some time, but I think it's worth it because one, it looks really pretty, but two, I'm going to end up creating 2 cards from this one A2 panel of no line watercoloring. So I'm just finishing up this last little leaf here, and now I'm ready to move on to the flowers. Very repetitive and very relaxing coloring, at least I think so. So unfortunately my camera didn't film me coloring these big blooms, but I'm going to repeat the process for the little ones so you can still see. I start with a yellow first, just color with my marker direct to paper, the base of the petals, and then I blend it out with my damp brush. Then I'm going to move on to a darker orange. I'm only going to do this for my orange flowers. This is a really vivid orange, and again I went right at the base of the petal and then blended that orange out, and it just creates kind of a soft, almost peachy orange for these flowers. And some of the flowers I will actually just leave the yellow, so I'll color with that 993, that kind of really mustardy yellow, and just leave them alone. And then the other ones I'll take it one step further and I'll add the orange and blend those out. Now I'm using a third color as well. This is a purple color. I'm just going to repeat the same process by coloring with that marker direct to paper at the base of the petal and then just blend it out with my damp brush. So now I'm just going to repeat this, coloring them either the orange combo, just the yellow, or the purple for all the remaining blooms. So now we have jumped ahead to me finishing up this very last flower. This one I am just coloring it with the yellow, the 993, and once I kind of blend out that yellow, this panel is done. I'll hold it to the camera so you get a little bit closer look. Very simple no line watercoloring. There is a lot, but we do get 2 cards in the end. So now I'm going to go back to my Misty with the Sweet Blooms Cling stamp in it, and I'm going to stamp an A2 panel of purple cardstock in Candied Violet. Now I'm going to move on to creating my sentiment. I'm going to use Leah's Ornate uppercase and lowercase letters, and I have a A2 acetate grid sheet here just to help me get these letters in position. I'm going to stamp out the word friend, and I just want to make sure that I have part of the friend or part of the letters on the bottom half of my panel and some of it on the top half. Doesn't have to be perfectly in the center. I just want to make sure that when I cut this in half, some of those letters are down below and some of it are on top. I hope that makes sense. Now that my sentiment is complete, I went ahead and stamped it in a dark purple. This is Regal Kiss. And now I'm going to repeat this process, or at least stamp this word on my no line watercolor panel. Because I'm going to do some heat embossing, I did put down some anti-static powder and then inked up Friend in Versamark ink. Now I'm just going to dip my panel into some gold embossing powder. Once I get all of my letters covered with the embossing powder, I then will heat set this with my heat gun. And when I finish that, I'll have these two panels where the Sweet Blooms image, or the background, and the word Friend are in the exact same position on both of these panels. Now I'm going to take them and I'm going to cut them in half. So I'm going to cut them at 2 1/8, and then I'm going to put the two halves from the different panels together. I have another panel here. This is just some cream kind of scrap cardstock, and I've covered it with some adhesive, and now I'm going to piece these panels together on this piece of card, or onto this A2 panel. So I'll just put those two halves together, and now we're ready to kind of move on to the next step. But you can see here will create this kind of fun two-toned front panel. Now I went ahead and die cut Friend using the matching dies. So I used the Ornate Uppercase and Lowercase dies to die cut Friend, and now I'm going to remove the inside part because I just want the outline. I need to make that Friend pop away from the background a little bit. I have a quill bottle here filled with some matte glue, and I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to the back side of that outline, kind of dab that onto a towel just to remove any excess glue so it doesn't kind of ooze out and get everywhere, and then I'll just line it up with my stamped letter. And once I get that in place, I'll then move on to my next letter. You can definitely use some tweezers like you see me doing here to kind of make sure I get that perfectly around the stamp letter. So I'm moving on to the R, again repeating the process, adding some glue to the backside, and then kind of tapping off the excess on a towel. And then here I am finishing up with that inside part for the D. So now I'm going to move on to kind of my final step. I'm going to stamp a sentiment from the Thankful for Friends stamp set. I have some more of that purple cardstock, and I'm going to heat emboss on it. So I applied some anti-static powder, stamped my sentiment in Versamark ink, then just dipped it into some gold embossing powder, and then I'll just heat set this with my heat tool. Once I've heat set this sentiment, I am going to trim it down to a strip. So you see here it is all trimmed, and I'm going to kind of wrap this card up. So I'm going to first adhere my strip down onto 2 pieces of stacked white cardstock. So I just cut some really thin white cardstock, stacked it on top of each other, and then glued my stamped strip right on top. That's just going to add some dimension. So that's the only reason why I did that, is just to add a little bit of dimension. I went ahead and adhered my panel on to an A2 top folding card base, and now I'll just finish the card by adhering my sentiment down onto the card front. And here is the finished card. I'll now hold my card up to the camera so you can get a good look at all the details. I really love the contrast here between that bright and vivid no-line watercoloring and the monotoned half. I think that has a really fun look. I also love these letters. That outline just makes those words or those letters pop, and I just think this is a really fun and unique card design, great for kind of stretching those colored panels. I hope you guys enjoyed today's cards and video. If you'd like any more information on the products I use, please head over to Pinkfresh. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.